Hello, this is video number 2 of what they neglect to teach us concerning World War II. I specifically try to zero in on the what we're taught here in the United States. Basically, there's a little bit of differences in Europe. In Europe, they know the BS or bunk, if you will. They know more of what's bunk and what's reality because most of them have had parents or grandparents that have told them realities, and they lived through these realities over in Europe. So there are many more Europeans that know that they're getting BS taught to them and a bunch of malarkey in their school systems, but at least they know it. Here in North and South America, we don't know it, and that sends me right back to my initial statements in the first video that history repeats itself, and the only reason it repeats itself and this misery continues, all this war continues, is because we do not know the real history. So at any rate, we talked about Austria and the Sudetenland and Prussia. I didn't touch on anything. I didn't touch on the Alsace-Lorraine and other issues in Western Europe. We did talk about Austria and debunked that, if you will, that annexation, that the Germans just went in there and took it over. They failed to mention that over 98% of the Austrians voted to join the German Empire, and that doesn't sound like an annexation to me in the way that we think of annexation by any means. We talked about the Sudetenland, and I mentioned that it was a northern area, and in fact it was a northern area of Czechoslovakia, but it was to the extreme western ends, and it had a lot of mountainous regions. These were lands taken after World War I, and millions of Germans lived in this area. I didn't get into a lot of specifics concerning any of the three issues, but I believe we got into it enough that you can explore on your own to get the truth and proper information. And more importantly, this happened yesterday. My intent is that we're looking to the future, and for us not to continue to be fooled and misled by this kindergarten psychological propaganda that gets pulled on us continually. And that's my objective, is to get us to thinking, get the horse blinders off and say, you're lying to us, because you're either to the right or you're to the left generally in North America, period, not just including the United States. And you're lied to 50% of the time if you consider yourself to the right or the left. If you consider yourself in the middle, you're lied to well in excess of 50% of the time. So be careful. That's my intent here. We talked about Prussia and Western Prussia just being taken and given to Poland that had actually been under foreign control for well in excess of 100 years. So basically it was a newly created country. I want to go back to Poland because when I mentioned Prussia, I did not mention Danzig, and Danzig was a northeastern port city up at the Baltic Sea, and it was very important for Germany, and over 97% of the people there in that city were Germans and had just been placed under a newly created Polish government's control after World War I. These were the people that were heavily discriminated against and whatnot, just for being German. So my intent for pointing all this out is to let you know where the anger and hate was spawned from. This just did not develop on its own. At any rate, Hitler was willing to, he said, give us a corridor where, and he wanted a railway and a highway, so trucks and cars could go back and forth to the mainland Germany, to Danzig, and trains could go back and forth, and he wanted that, and he wanted to guarantee that the travel and whatnot under German authority. He even went so far as to try to get the Poles to let Germany politically control Danzig, but that the economic control and the taxation, so all the economic benefits could have stayed with Poland. And many historians, including myself, believe that that would have been that would have stopped him. Now, a lot of people will say, Jim, what about in the West? Well, in the West, oddly enough, another interesting fact that you're not told, you have to dig up on your own, is that there was not only one Siegfried line in France protecting the poor defenseless French folks from the mean Huns coming in, the Germans, and attacking them. Hitler had constructed his own Siegfried line, and it's called Hitler's Siegfried line, and there's a book written about that. He was digging in defensively in case he were attacked. So all of that can be debunked very easily with pure documented fact. There was no master design here to take over the whole earth, or even to take over Europe. That was not the intent at all. There was rhetoric. Hitler had claimed in Mein Kampf and some speeches that he wanted Lebensraum, which is living space for the German people. This was a lot of rhetoric, not unlike Obama or Bush saying something and then saying, oh, well, you don't think I'd really want to, that I would really do that, and that they didn't do it. So this is normal political stuff here, that little things get pulled out and put into a literal proportion in either war propaganda at the moment or victor's propaganda at the conclusion of war. And it's another history repeating itself. So that's just fallacy. Hitler desperately did not want war with England. I want to quickly let you know another fact. Hitler reached out to the British and asked them to get Poland to talk to them and try to work out a deal concerning the Danzig situation. And England sent this was just proceeding up to Hitler invading Poland. The British government sent communiques, which we now know, this is documents I'm talking about here. Verify these things on your own. That's what I want you to do. You'll learn more that way, and you'll realize how the wool's pulled over your eyes there again. The British government sent a communique to Poland. Yes, negotiate with them. However, we're not expecting you to do nothing with concern to the Danzig situation. So in other words, they were saying, hey, negotiate with them, but we're not asking you to do anything. And it's important to note that even the English people understood full well that this was a travesty of justice, the Danzig situation, and they wanted it to go back to the Germans. They were like, hey, give this back to them. This is nuts. And at any rate, the Chamberlain was still in office, and his government sent this communique telling them, hey, talk to them, but we're not expecting you to do anything. To be no resolve in this situation. And oddly enough, the other little known thing that we're just not told, even at the university level, is that Great Britain basically just sent a promissory note over there to the Poles, whom were a extreme right-wing group of colonels that ran the country, really dictatorial in some big aspects and very extremist. But Great Britain sent the what I call a promissory note, open-ended. We don't care what happens. If you go to war, we're going to war with you. And France had an alliance with Great Britain, and voila, that's how this whole thing, World War II, got started. Repeating the mistakes of World War I, which were these crazy, insane alliances. How we could relate that today is our Department of State and Washington setting up a NATO alliance. The alliance, John McCain stating, hey, we want to give Georgia and several other of the Baltic states and the Ukraine and whatnot. God bless all those people. I want them to have self-determination, but I don't want to start World War III on account of them either. We have given open-ended agreements through NATO. So if Russia were to go into the Ukraine, as an example, voila, World War III. We just keep continuing these situations. And if the Ukraine, God forbid, and I'm not stating that it is, but we're antagonizing Russia through terrorist groups or whatever, there we go. If Russia defended itself, we would be at war. We've got to cut these things out. These open-ended alliances, you're my friend, and irrespective of this or that, we are going to war on your behalf if war starts. that is insane. And it is not to the justification of one U.S. citizen what happens in the Baltic states. So that's the insanity of it. If Russia were to move back into the Baltic states tomorrow and we started World War III, it would not be to the benefit or protection of one United States citizen. Their interests are economically, socially, or otherwise. So that's why all this is so very important. I want to move on to Sir Winston Churchill, a known plagiarist, an art criminal. You're not taught this either, and a basically crazy man to the standards of the day. Winston Churchill met his cabinet in the nude. A government function in Great Britain took place at bathhouses. With him standing there stark naked, not in the pool but out of the pool, addressing his cabinet naked. But you never hear this. Over 20 proposals for peace Churchill turned down flat. Churchill ruined the British Empire. The strongest nation on earth within 25 years was gone, and basically the assets, without all the land mass, taken over by the United States, putting tremendous economic pressures on us, and we are following suit, and we are going to experience being gone as well. We're already, in my guesstimation, 3/4 of the way there. We can't sustain a major war, and we certainly cannot sustain being the protectorate of the earth, especially while we're corrupt and unjust ourselves, and our foreign policy leaves so much to be desired as far as the world justice or ethical and moral actions ourselves. Roosevelt knew that Churchill was nuts. He knew that Churchill was a plagiarist. Churchill was a pretty good painter, and he would paint these paintings and forge these famous artists' names on them. And that's how Churchill made a living. And Churchill was in bad financial trouble. War was only of benefit personally to Winston Churchill. There is also, I believe it's Churchill's War by David Irving, I believe. I haven't read the book, but I believe this information to be in his book. Winston Churchill, they had busted the codes, the German codes, and so they knew when these bombing raids were coming, and Winston Churchill held back from protecting his own people. And it even went to the extent Winston Churchill repeatedly said he loved his secretaries and those whom worked closest to him. The Enigma, they busted one of the codes, and where his office and his secretaries worked was going to be bombed, or so he thought. He says, hey, I'm going to take an early weekend and go get some rest in the countryside. You ladies stay here, continue your work, and I'll see you Monday. He flees and leaves, knowing through the broken codes that the Germans are fixing to bomb where they're at that evening. So he flees as the coward that he actually was, and leaves his secretaries there, knowing that they are going to die that night, and does not warn them, nothing. He could have took the secretaries with him. This was no strategic thing he did. This was no, oh, I've got to keep this secret or we'll lose the war thing. He did this so he could spar up more hate against the Germans. And later that afternoon, as they were in transit to the countryside, his car was intercepted, and they said, no, we read this wrong. Here's what it said. They're not going to bomb here. They're going to be in a completely other area, and I believe that other area was approximately 300 miles away. So he turns around and comes back and says he canceled it. We didn't know all this information then, but through Freedom of Information Acts, we know this to be true today. So we hear, and there again, I'm not defending Hitler, but we hear how crazy he was, and yet when we look at facts, we see that as far as from being loyal to those around you, as far as acting sane, Churchill on a daily basis was far worse than Hitler. I don't want to get into the Holocaust, but as far as the British Empire went, you want to talk about killing people over extended periods of time, and racism, and discrimination, deaths, tortures, theft. Let's talk about the British Empire. Has been no empire in history, in recent history, that sustained itself for such a long period of time, with more death and destruction and misery cast upon people, and blatant murders than the British Empire. And so, but of course that doesn't get mentioned. It gets mentioned, but you can't relate it to World War II. So these are just a few things that I wanted to let you know about. It's obvious that the powers to be, England specifically, wanted this war. And when facts are looked at, if some aliens came down to this planet and started reading factual documents, they would conclude quickly that England actually caused World War II, not Germany. Poland had a hand in it, but not Poland. The USSR, which I'm going to do a separate series on, but played parts in it, but not them. If you had to point at one specific cause of World War II, at the immediate starts and the immediate proceedings to the war, it would be Great Britain. And there are many other facts, documented facts I could mention that I will not be, time just will not permit for me to do. I'm not a Barack Obama fan at all. I'm terribly against things that he believes in politically. You couldn't find two people on more opposite ends of the spectrum than myself and the President of the United States, Barack Obama. So please don't misunderstand this statement. But one thing that some years ago I got really upset with him about was that he sent a bust back to Great Britain that they had sent to him as a gift upon entering office of Winston Churchill. He sent that bust back. As far as world history and world justice goes, President Obama did the right thing with that specific instance. And I'm sorry to say that's looking at his presidency moving towards 6 years of it is the only thing I can say I'm proud of our president for. The only thing. That was a statement against one specific leader in history that was hell-bent on war and probably had the biggest responsibility for what some to believe 50 million deaths. And I applaud him for it. And I'm not being anti-Jewish when I say this, because facts dictate that yes, there was some discrimination going on and some horrible circumstances, but the Holocaust, as we're taught it, did not start occurring until 1942. It was, if you look at it, it was a result of the war. And a lot of Zionist historians that are Zionists tend to believe that Hitler was the greatest catalyst for the creation of Israel. And as a matter of fact, he, as far as world leaders go, seemed to be working the hardest for a Jewish state. He just wanted the Jewish population out of Germany. And not saying that that was right, but I'm just stating some facts here. And I'm certainly not trying to defend bad things that Hitler did, but in the process I'm not going to defend bad things that Winston Churchill did, or Joseph Stalin for that fact, or President Roosevelt, or President Truman, or any of our generals, or any German generals. Or I'm not going to hold one up in esteem to make another one worse than they actually were with false propaganda. I'm not going to do it. That is what is going to probably shortly bring upon World War III. And it's every citizen of this earth's responsibility. And as far as the United States go, it's our responsibility as United States citizens to see to it that this does not happen. We already know Washington, D.C. is out of control. Washington, D.C. is hell-bent in a military-industrial complex that Eisenhower warned us about. We already know that Washington, D.C. is hell-bent in a foreign pact called AIPAC. That is the largest lobbying firm, an organization rather, that we have in the United States, and it's foreign, and it is dictating our policy. Hillary Clinton stated, "I'm glad they moved the office closer to the Department of State building. That way we can check if what we're doing is right or not." So, and she's not the only one that's made reference to that. Condoleezza Rice made reference to this as well. So it's both the Republicans and Democrats that are taking us towards the path to World War III and the path to hell, unbiblically and unjustly, I might add. So if you think I'm full of it, please get online, sift through pros and cons, and make your own mind up. But be very careful of the jargon and propaganda that you listen to, because one thing is for sure: facts are facts, and non-facts are propagated propaganda designed for war. And concerning World War II and a lot of the warring history, facts are facts, non-facts are war promoting propaganda. Thank you so much for watching this video, and God bless you.